Hey guys, Philip Schaedler here with our monthly podcast, and let's dive right into it. Today I'm going to have a special guest who's going to come on in just a minute, Ron Glasser from Mac Mortgage. And really quickly, I just want to run through some stats. Let me just get my screen shared with you. And one of the things we're just talking about is interest rates, mortgage rates. Currently, we're around the between 6 and 6.5%. These good days over here, 2020 and 21, with 2.5%, 3% are long gone. And I don't know if we're going to see that again. However, we're going to talk about today about different things, how to get into home ownership in this current market. And here is the current rates from my friend Ron, who's going to come up in a minute here. Conventional 30-year fixed is around 6.096. We're almost approaching the 5. So that's going to be interesting. New listing, weekly listings are 62. Oops, let me go back. 62, which is a little bit higher than a year ago. And price reductions are interesting because those are definitely up, and the market has slowed down a bit. Could be the election has something to do with it, who knows, but people are more hesitant. Last year, we were around the 31%, so that has gone up. Total inventory currently, this is single family residences only, is at 704. That has gone up. I do believe that has gone up because there's also less buyer activity, so that's a possibility. And total housing inventory is 909,344. So another thing is interesting. There are more withdrawals than before. And this, for every 2 homes sold, 1 more is withdrawn. So if sellers have the chance to wait this market out, they seem like they're going to take that opportunity, right? If they have it. So in 2023, we were way down here. Look at this. We were at about 15. So this doubled, right? This doubled withdrawing. Again, the market is not the greatest, but still transactions are happening. So let me bring on my friend here, Ron. I see he's here. There you are.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Ron. How are you?
Great. The weather is finally cooled off. It's my favorite time. It's the best time probably actually to go visit your Malibu listing because the weather is phenomenal now. It's not a million degrees. So
it's funny you say that because in June, when we had the June gloom, we had all this overcast all the time. And when I did a showing, it was always not as nicely as when there's clear skies, obviously, right? So, yes, that makes a big impact. And glad the heat went.
It's great to see you, too. Finally, we get connected.
Same here. I know, the reason why I brought you on, and I have to say, I'm always very loyal to the people that I worked with and that have shown extreme efforts, and I have to say, the person that did my mortgage, Kat Whitman, on my property, I love her dearly, but she doesn't want to go on Zoom. She doesn't want to go on camera.
I get it. Trust me, I get it.
Not everybody likes that, but I love it dearly. But the reason why I'm bringing you on, obviously, is because we've done a transaction before up on Burnett Avenue. And you've really gone above and beyond. And this is really something that stood out to me because if you recall, I think it was the LIPA program. And it took a long time to close, right? I think 60 or some days. And I remember my seller at that time, a couple of times was so frustrated that she was considering a cancellation, right? She already had me basically fill out the cancellation of contract form, which was like, oh my gosh. But then what really saved the day was the fact that I think you even, or some of you wanted to go to the city themselves to pick up a paper check because they didn't want to do a transfer, something like that, right? So anyway, this is why I brought you on, because I know you are a tough guy in the business and you do what it takes to get things closed. And really it was because of your efforts that we hung in there. Because if I would have had a mortgage guy that's kind of like so, I would have probably told my seller, you know what, they're not moving forward, let's just cancel, right? But the fact that you really stayed in touch with me every day and really kept me updated made a big difference. Anyway, so
thank you. Wow.
I have a few questions for you, right? And this
Absolutely.
is mostly because I get a lot of the buyers that are obviously confused right now. Number one, the big confusion is with the NAR settlement, right? Another one is they're just saying, well, the rates are high, prices are high. And what I tell them right now is, it's not maybe like 10, 15 years ago, it's maybe easier to buy a place. Now you really have to do your homework, right? You really have to clean up your credit. You really have to make sure that you don't open any new accounts or whatever. But can you kind of sum it up what a first-time home buyer should do and when they should start preparing for getting a loan?
So that's a great question. And most everybody who is interested in buying a house the first time, they usually just think, okay, I'm going to start looking.
Right.
In my opinion, it's the biggest waste of time. I've had clients that, if you can believe this, have looked at houses in a certain price range for 2 years, up to 24 months. And when it's finally time to get pre-approved and get the mortgage, even with someone like myself, and there's a lot of wholesale people that are very competitive, it just doesn't push them to that limit. And they wasted 2 years of their time looking at inventory and they have to start over. So really, the second you think, I'm just interested, even if you're interested and you don't want to feel pressured or anything to just buy right now, even if you're thinking of buying in 5 years, see what you can afford today, see what you need. Because when you talk to someone like yourself who really understands the industry, understands the housing market, then you talk to someone on the financing side like myself and understands, hey, what does it take to qualify for a mortgage? Hey, what are you going to probably have to, report on your taxes? What is your CPA going to have to help you with? How much do you have to save? What does our monthly payment look like in a year or 2 years, even tomorrow, if you want to buy a house?
Right.
It's really smart that the second you're ready, or you even are not ready, doesn't matter. The second you think about it, the thought gets in your head, because I think 99.9% of people want to buy a house in their lifetime. If you think about it and you're ready, talk to your agent or your loan officer or whoever and figure out, first off, what can I afford? What's the game plan? And if I can't afford it now, what do I need to do to get there?
Right. Yeah, it's a good point, because I tell people too, first of all, I tell them, figure out a neighborhood where you want to look, right? I put them on an email drop, a search, but I also tell them, call a mortgage guy like you, call and it's funny. It's like, they're very hesitant to do that because sometimes I tell them call, I give them a number or anybody or a mortgage guy, and they'll never call. And I said, why didn't you call? I thought you're going to call them. I said, well, I don't know. I think they're going to call me all the time. I said, look, if you're serious about purchasing, you have to have a game plan and you got to put something in motion and you got to talk to somebody who knows his stuff, because some people actually think it's almost like going to a store. Oh, I'm going to buy a house. Next month I'm going to go and look and buy for a house. And it's a big disappointment, so that's a very good point. Now, another question I have is, the BAC issue, right? The buyer's compensation. And actually, I think, let me just see here. I had a little video. Let me see if I still have that open. No, I don't have it open right now, but you had a video on Instagram, right?
Yes.
And the interesting thing is, I was always wondering when this change happened, is the lender or the lending industry, are they considering to incorporate the buyer's agent compensation, if it's not paid by the seller, into the mortgage? And
so that's a great question. Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
And I'll tell you this, right? So as someone like myself as a broker, my duty is to the client. I want to get them the best deal. I want to get them the best loan that's going to fit their needs and get them into the house they want, right? That's my goal. Right. Let's talk about the bank or the lender's goal. Their goal is to make interest on you. That's the truth. The bank wants to make money off of you. So logically, right, if a bank or a lender was going to say, hey, here's that extra 14,000, here's that extra 20,000, whatever it is, your buyer's agent's commission, are they going to be able to make interest on it? And my answer is probably no. I doubt that any local, federal, state government that regulates, Department of Real Estate, anyone who regulates these commissions is going to allow a lender to make interest off of that commission. Can that change? Yes. It's not up to me. Just looking at how things like this happen and move, it's either that they're going to repeal it because people are not buying in this market,
right,
or they might allow it, right? Or that it's going to stay the same. And from what it looks like, it's probably going to stay the same, because I doubt the lender is going to be able to charge interest. Besides that, why else would they just give you that money on basically on a 0% interest to buy a home? They wouldn't allow that.
But if they would incorporate into the mortgage, you obviously would pay interest on that, right?
Yeah, right. So, but there are certain ways that you kind of can really get around it, and it doesn't have that big of a difference. In fact, on my page, like you mentioned, and also if you're part of my newsletter, I did make a few videos showing that even like a $750,000 home, which is getting up there, the price range is differing. If you want to pay the buyer's agent commission cash, if you want to just kind of lower your down payment, or what most people probably have heard of, you increase the purchase price a little bit, right? That it makes sense that, you're going to get an appraisal on something like that it works, it makes sense. Your payment difference is very small, almost $100 a month. Or you have to bring that full commission cash, or the seller pays it.
But hang on a second. So if you would increase the price of the home, which would then be above the appraised value, right?
Yes. So that's also a good question. So there would have to be a negotiation involved, and that's where a really great agent is gonna have to be, taking a hold of this. This is a complicated situation. It's a very tricky and interesting time. There's no getting around it. That's the truth about it. You're seeing agents making more money on the listing side. You're seeing agents making less on the buyer side, less all around, more all around. There are tricky ways to go about it. There's smart ways to do it as well. And for the buyer, something they should know is the statistics. So let's look at New York, who's enacted this NAR settlement practically almost for over a year now. Wow. 80% of those homes that are on the market that are selling normally, it's the same way, where that seller is still willing to give a concession, or they're still willing to negotiate on that buyer's agent commission. The other 20% are saying, hey, we want you to pay. So it just comes down to, if you find that dream house, there's options. You don't have to fork up that money. You might have to lower your down payment, or you might have to increase your purchase price a little bit. And it's going to depend on that appraised value. If that appraised value can't meet, then you're going to have to lower your down payment and just make sure that you have enough money to get it through.
Well, it's interesting because I have yet to see, of course, now we cannot anymore on MLS because we're no longer allowed to show compensation, right? Which was a way to see what sellers offer.
Exactly.
But I have yet to see really a seller that doesn't offer it. There's probably a few here and there, but from what I've heard, and I'm not sure if this is absolutely true, in the state of Washington in 2019, they did exactly that, right? And I guess what I read was that 90% of the homes sat on the market longer who didn't offer a buyer agent compensation.
Exactly.
And after 6-7 months, I said, you know what? The heck with it. I'm going to offer the BAC because I need to move on. I need to move forward with my plans and sell this asset. So, but I do have one buyer now. I'm usually mostly on the seller side, but I have one buyer now who's looking in the $700,000-$800,000 range. And she recently told me, she's on a tight budget. And she said, well, is there a way that I don't have to pay your fee, my fee, right, as a buyer agent? And I said, well, what we can do is, and this is basically what agents were accused of prior, is steering, right? So if an agent would look for, let's say 10 properties and one would show on the MLS, it's only offering 2%, an unethical agent, which I think is not okay, put that listing aside and didn't show it. That is steering. That's incorrect. 100% agree. Yeah. But now the buyer tells me can you only show me properties where the seller's paying your fee? So that's kind of like the steering has been transferred over to the buyer side now, because
Exactly.
sides, so that would result in less offers, obviously, to that particular listing, right? So it's kind of interesting to see how that pans out. And I think it's still early in the whole thing. I think the dust is still settling. Who knows? The DOJ might still make some adjustments on this.
Yeah.
But I have one listing coming up in Brentwood. That's a trustee sale, and she's considering a 1% BAC, right? And I told her, I said, look, you don't have to offer anything. I'm obligated by law to show you transparency. You don't have to offer anything. It's
exactly.
And it's really in a hot area in Brentwood, so I could imagine that it would work, right? I've never sold one property where there's no BAC offered on the seller side. It'll be the first one. But anyway, so that's interesting to me. Still, it's a lot of confusion in the market about that, and a lot of buyers are like calling me up and saying, what is going on with that? And some people misunderstood it completely. They think that the entire seller agent commission is being cut, and it's really, I said, it's not what the lawsuit was about. It was about making the seller aware that they have options. They don't have to pay, right? That's basically what it is.
Absolutely.
Let me see what I had on my list of questions for you. Oh, yes. So one thing that had that transaction that we did in Burnett was the LIPA program, right?
Yes.
Is that still available to people?
So there's two. There's that LIPA and there's that MIPA program. They're both down payment assistance programs. The answer is yes. There's usually always some form of down payment assistance program. Some of them are a lottery system. Let's be transparent about them. Do us in the mortgage world love to do these? Yes. We love to do them to help the client. Is it a lot of work? Is it a stressful transaction? Is it going to be longer? Is there going to be a lot of fighting, a lot of extra work? Absolutely. They're not easy. I think a lot of people get the misconception about the down payment assistance programs. And actually, if you want to know the truth, I would say 70 to 80% of the people who say, these are just the people who say, I only want a down payment assistance. So 70 to 80% of those people end up doing something like a low down payment low down payment FHA or low down payment conventional loan, rather, because it's very hard to push a loan like that through, and it's not on us. So those programs are still available. And as you know, with ours, we did all the work done, complete, and everything. And just like how government works, it's slow. The longest part of our transaction was getting the check. We did everything. It was done. They stamped it, said, you're good. That's it. We have the money. And it literally took them almost 3 weeks to mail a check. So that's kind of where you're at with these types of loans, that they're not simple, and you might have to do a lottery system, but they're still available. And if you're really interested in that, know that there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? You're might have to, if you want to refinance later, you might get one refinance, or you might get two or something. You might not even get any, and you might have to pay that off through your equity, or you might have to increase your loan amount, or that second might have a higher interest rate, right? So it could even be a second and third lien on your house to do that 0%. Or like MIPA and LIPA, the city has an equity interest in your property. So they're almost investing in your property. And you have to remember that. If your house is 500,000, goes up to $1 million, but you had them give you 15%, well, when you sell that $1 million house, they get 15% of the million, not the loan that they gave you.
Yeah, that's where it gets complicated, and from what I understood in this last transaction we did a while back, so I think the purchase price was around 540, and they got 160,000 down payment. So the way I understood it, correct me if I'm wrong, it was a 30-year fixed mortgage, but then after that mortgage is paid off, they pay back the 160 LIPA loan. Is that how it works, or how did?
So that was a MIPA. So it was 115,000 towards their down payment and closing costs. And that was an awesome transaction because that client, they could afford everything, and it really helped them become a homeowner, which was so important. This is someone who is, a real Angelino. They live in LA. They have their whole life here. They want to start a family here. They want to do things. So for them to get ownership and begin building equity, it was totally worth it. Even when the city is getting equity, it's worth it. Now, what that loan was is they got 115,000, After 30 years, yes, they have to start making payments on it to pay the principal back on that loan. They get one free refinance. So when the rates are going to improve here, hopefully soon, we're going to do a refinance for them. But if they want to refinance a second time, or they want to sell the home, they're going to have to pay that back in a sense. So they're going to have to lose that equity.
So like a title change would trigger a repayment, right? Like,
yes,
even if you add somebody to the title, would that also trigger a repayment? Like,
it's a great question about the title. It really depends. It's going to be up to the city and the lender, right? So that lender and the city, maybe they're willing to negotiate on the sections of title. But generally speaking, if you want to remove somebody from title or add somebody, it's going to have an effect with the loan because the bank really also owns the home in a sense, and they want to make sure they're getting paid. If they're not getting paid, or the person who owes them is now on title, they're going to want to refinance and get out.
Got it. Okay. Now another thing about this program is, and I have it on my website too. The bottom is a link where you get to the state what's available for a down payment assistance program. You put in the address, whatever. The only thing is, I'm glad the state or the government makes these funds available for down payment assistance, but they're never being advertised, so nobody knows about it, right? How do people know about it? Do you have? I know you have a newsletter. I get your newsletter every week. But,
yes.
But do you notify people that, hey, this program is coming out? No, because they're also customized. How do people find out about it?
Absolutely. So it's very interesting. And a lot of times what happens is with these programs, if they try to do marketing campaigns like triggered leads and things like that, where they're going to pay Instagram that if your data kind of fits a certain set, like, hey, this person was looking for a home and this, they're going to try to send you an ad. Besides that, they don't really have a lot of advertising for these loans. And unless you're in the industry like myself and you get the, what's going around town, the lip, then you're not going to know. So what I do is I have a newsletter that goes out specifically for all my clients that have already previously purchased real estate.
Right.
And I also have another newsletter that goes out to everyone who's still looking, anyone that I've pre-approved and or spoken with, and they're still in the process of looking, and they're updated on those programs. Absolutely. And they come and go. Sometimes some come in, the funds run out, and you got to wait for the next one. But there's generally always something going on. And
that's what I noticed. Yeah. So sometimes you have to be really early on. I think there was the Dream for All program, which has been modified so many times. And that has become more complicated. But I remember there was one, which was really a good one, was a while back, where the state would give you, as a first-time home buyer, I think they give you up to 20% down payment. And if you lived in the house more than 5 years, it was forgiven.
There were forgivables like that. It's a different market now. It's very interesting. And stuff like that, you have to remember. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And you're going to have to pay for something in some way. And even with that, they're still really great. There's no there's some secret power that's there to screw you over in the end. It's really the city just wants to kind of cover their costs. They're not trying to make some steep interest profit on you. And they're really investing in you in a sense to be a homeowner. But you have to remember, these are competitive. A lot of people are applying for these and competing, and they get swamped. So
that's why I tell people all the time, you gotta have it's a game plan, and you have to have tenacity and consistency, because it looks overwhelming in the beginning, I have to say, for when you look at the whole process of it right now, right? Purchasing a home, because you have high interest rates, fairly high interest rates, and prices are high. Let me just share real quick. This was the down payment program that, when you go to my website, where is it here? Is this the one? Can you see my screen?
I can see it. Absolutely.
Okay. So this is where people would go in and, basically fill out the information, and then it shows them what is available for that particular area, right? That's what I did with my client who was looking to buy that, right? So you also work with these programs. Are you familiar with these that I just showed?
Yes. Yeah, there's really tons of these programs. And it sometimes it depends on the city, sometimes it depends on county, state. There's many on different levels. Like that one that we did for our client was a city loan. It was through the LA city. I have a team dedicated just to down payment assistance loans. I'm on all of my transactions, but I do have assistants, processors, and other loan officers who specialize in these things that are part of these transactions. And I think that's the smartest thing you can do is if someone's going to buy a home and want to do a specific program, that they should work with someone like you who has tons of experience, right? First off, you have tons of experience with high-end luxury real estate, but you also have experience with the down payment assistance things, and you understand how it works and how it moves, escrow periods, contingencies, all these things. They kind of work hand in hand, right? You have to know how to negotiate on the luxury level, and you have to negotiate on those lower income limits as well.
Right.
And so the advice I have for those is, if you're interested, talk to someone who has a dedicated team to something like that, because it's a lot of work. And behind the scenes on what we're doing, this isn't we're submitting an application and we walk away. We are calling hours a day, emailing hours a day. There's a lot involved. There are like 50 conditions that need to be fulfilled. Right. So there's a lot of things that need to be taken care of.
It's a good point you brought up, because in the beginning, when I started real estate, like 7-8 years ago, I really didn't have a team formed, right? And people used to tell me, my broker said, check out escrow companies. And what you mentioned just now, I think, is the most important thing. And that also ties into the new BAC settlement. There's a benefit to it. But the key, what I'm trying to say, is that I have my escrow company that I can rely on 100%. Now, what has happened recently is my team at that particular company left for whatever reason. I don't know. They just stopped. But then I interviewed in the same company, different people that can take over. And I said to the lady, I said, look, it's very important to me that I can rely on you 100%. So you have to be as good as the previous person or better. It cannot be worse, right?
Exactly.
And so we had lengthy interviews. We talked about it, and she's going to be my escrow officer for the next transaction and the listing in Malibu. But the key is what you just mentioned is you have to have your team in place, right? You really have to have the people in place with lending, with escrow, inspectors, or whatever, because then you really have a strong foundation to have a successful transaction, right? That really is key. And what I meant with the BSC, with the NAR settlement, there's one benefit, because truth be told, buyers, especially first-time buyers, they don't really know the difference if they talk to one agent, that agent shows them some properties, and then they go buy with another, right? This is a big no-no and a big blow for real estate agents, but buyers sometimes just really don't know that, right? So with the written agreement that's necessary now, which is similar to a listing agreement, you're now basically locked in to some extent. I mean, I would never hold a gun to somebody's head to work with me. If they don't want to work with me, I tear up the agreement. But the point is, there is a written reminder that now you're with this agent, and that agent's looking out for your best interest. And now it's a teamwork, right, going forward. Where before you could kind of switch around and not have this guarantee. So that's one benefit, right? Talking about rate cuts, the Feds have announced rate cuts. What do you think? I mean, they say there might be 5 rate cuts in 2025. What do you think is the truth to that, or what do you think happens with that?
So that's you are hitting bombs today. You got great questions.
Well, I'm glad.
It's funny because, so let's look at history, right? We forget about it. The government loves to give false promises. It's the truth that I think everyone can agree with. I don't care where you fall in on any spectrum of anything. I think every single American can say, the government told me one thing and they did the other. So what's something to look at? So we have Fed rate cuts that are coming this week. Today is Tuesday, and we expect things to be moving today and tomorrow. And these are going to really affect and change the market. So let's consider 2 things. There is a 65 or to 66% chance, actually looking at it this morning, that there's going to be a 50 basis point cut to the federal borrowing rate. Okay. So we have to consider, as lenders, everyone's borrowing money up the food chain.
Right.
So at that top level, it's Wall Street, and they're borrowing money from, they're doing treasury bonds, they're doing all these different things. And what that rate is that the federal government sets, that's the big number, and that's kind of padded. Everything else is padded on top of that. So if it's 50 basis points, that's coming up soon, that's going to be a big deal. I
Yeah.
think that it's going to be 25 to 50. So whether it's going to be 25 or 50, most people are betting on 50, but
Yeah.
we never know. That's the
You know,
truth.
it's interesting. What will be the trigger point? Is a 5 point, because what you're talking about will be a 5.5 mortgage rate, roughly, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me what the trigger point will be, because there's one other element that I learned about, because the cost of living has gone up so much in the last 2 years that some people had to dig into their savings and possibly into their down payment fund. So what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, they will have to do their math and really maybe wait. Who knows? Maybe it goes to 5 or even the high 4s. Who knows? I don't know if we're going to go that route. I wish we would, because I think it would really stimulate the market. But I don't know if that's going to go that far. They claim 5 rate cuts.
And this is why I don't believe that, and not even at all.
It
And I'll tell
seems,
you why, right?
it seems high,
So
yeah.
let's look at the numbers.
Mhm.
We have the highest amount of credit card debt right now.
Yes.
And I think most Americans are feeling it,
Right.
which is a really hard time for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Things are expensive. People are putting things on credit card. They are in a lot of debt that is not a mortgage or a home.
Right.
So we have to consider that. Also, inflation is still relatively very high.
Yeah.
The inflation reports have improved, but unemployment is really high right now,
Yep.
and people are struggling. So when these things happen, when you have high inflation and high debt, the banks and the federal government who have lent all this money, they need to make it back by having interest. They need to make it back with bonds and things like this. And they're not doing it as effective as they'd like. So
Right.
it's been so slow that this Fed rate cut that's happening, it's necessary. It is
Right.
not because it's
Right.
going to help the market in this. It is because there is so much stagnant water and we need some flow that they're lowering it. Should it
Right.
actually be lowered based off of inflation? No, it shouldn't. The
Right.
interest, technically speaking, people don't want to know this and they don't want to hear this, but it should even be higher so we can recoup that inflation, those inflation numbers.
Yeah.
Do I think 5 rate cuts in 2025? That's a great question. It's going to depend on government spending. As
Right.
much as we all want to agree with it, if we're going to have, and it does come from the top. It's going to come from a presidency. It's going to come from state legislatures, things like this that do the big spending.
Right.
Are they going to have huge, unemployment benefits that they're going to provide? Different types of healthcare that they're going to want to implement, things like this.
Right.
Are we going to see increased spending around the globe? We're involved in a lot of foreign conflicts that are very expensive, and it affects the American taxpayer the most. So
That's
if these
funny.
things continue,
Yeah.
we're not going to see 5. I'd be lucky to see 1.
Right. Yeah, it's funny you say that, because statistically they say elections don't affect the real estate market, and I would beg to differ, because I've had 2 agents who had their listings withdrawn, right, because they want to wait till after the election. And not getting political, that's whatever, if you hate one side or the other. But one person told me that if Trump wins, he believes that the rates will go down, Democrats will stay up, whatever the belief system is. You can't take that away from the client's mind, right?
Yeah.
Whatever they believe, they believe. But I think you have a good point, because I think the uncertainty right now is also with the election outcome. I think that has something to do with it. Again, I Google it, statistically it says it doesn't affect the market, but I kind of tend to see, because not only that, it's also the cost of living, right? Is it going to continue to go up, or is it going to come down? Because, truth be told, I'm not an expert in this, but logic would dictate that if you bring the gas prices down, it affects everything else, deliveries and whatever, right? All the way across the country. So I think energy costs have to come down in order for the market to really bloom, I think, or to get momentum again.
I could not agree more. And I think that a lot of people like to bring up 2 things. Hey, we've been involved in very expensive foreign conflicts, wars and stuff for like 30 years straight, right? We were, not to get political, and the real estate market increased and it got a lot better over time. The interest rates lowered. But the truth is that we did have a period of time around 2017 to 2021 where there were no big amounts of spending. We actually did a lot of cutback on this huge spending programs, and spending increased in certain aspects. But things like the COVID, what happened, And after that, there was a lot of other conflicts that, arose, and inflation hit and gas hit and the price of food. Those things all have an effect. If things like that get expensive, we have to borrow more, the inflation goes up, the interest rates have to increase, people don't want to buy real estate. So what I'm seeing right now with most of my clients is they're not even waiting. This is probably one of the first times in a very long time, almost 2 decades, that something like this has happened, where people don't want to wait for the federal interest rates to lower, but most people want to wait till a candidate is decided, whichever side. But it's very interesting because I think a lot of people want to see something. They want to know something. They want a decision, and then they're going to move forward with that decision.
Yeah, exactly. They want to go. They want to know which way it's going to go, and based on that, they're going to make the decision to move forward or stay back. Absolutely. And your point was, because during the COVID era, we printed $2 trillion, right? And I think this is what we're paying for. That's why the inflation really happened, right? Because we printed money out of thin air, basically, and it devalued the money. Before we wrap it up, I'm going to just put this in here. This is how people get a hold of you, right? Down here, just to make sure that
absolutely
correct. So again, if somebody decides to wants to buy a house, they should start a year prior, you think? To get
I think at least if you even get the idea, get started, know what you're going to do. Because, hey, someone might say, hey, you're ready to buy your dream house today. You're ready to buy your investment tomorrow. Or they might say, hey, it's going to take 2 years. But if you talk to a professional, they're going to tell you, hey, this is the plan and the steps you need to do. And you can start taking that right away.
Right. And one thing I'm going to point out, if for first-time home buyers, because I've heard this a lot where people say, oh, in LA, my son or my daughter lives in LA and they're never going to be able to afford a house. They want to buy a house, because everything is $1 million. And my answer to that is, it's not like it used to be. You may have to buy a lower price property as a stepping tool, right? So in other words, get into a $600,000-$700,000 condo or townhouse or whatever. And then years later, use the equity and then upgrade, right? It's not like you get the dream home right away, unless you have a rich uncle or rich parents. But I'm talking about somebody who is a normal, has a 9-to-5 job and has a profession like that. They should just consider also to get into a lower price property just to get started. What do you think about that?
No, I couldn't agree more. You have to think that the world is starting to really settle in its places. If you look at like these giant areas, Miami, New York, LA, they weren't so dominant like they are now as they were 100 years ago. People were more spread out. Now people are more concentrated in these areas. Of course, the values are going to go up. Look at New York City. Sure, there was a house in LA that's worth $2 million now, and it was worth $100,000, 40 years ago. But in New York, it was still very expensive because New York's had a history of being very dense and very expensive. So it is, you have to consider, how are you going to build that wealth and get there? Because back then there were also $2 million homes.
Right.
It just depends. It's different. Things increase over time. Things inflate. You have to be smart about it. LA is a very dense, very competitive area. People around the whole planet want to live here. People want to, even things like places like Idaho, Boise, Idaho are increasing in value a lot because it's getting denser. So you have to consider that. If it's getting denser, the prices are going to increase the denser it gets. So if you can, and you're willing to, take the commute, get the home, build it. Because if it's dense, it's going to get denser and denser over time. That population's increasing, that's coming to those cities. So it's just a starting. Don't time the market, right? We look at statistics. Timing the market never works. Getting in the market always works.
That's right, because I remember when I bought my townhouse, I had an option of 5%, and I got like a first-time homebuyer's credit of some amount, I forgot what it was, around 11,000, whatever. And then, I had a choice to do 4% and get only 700, right? And I was lucky because you couldn't time it. So I got the 5%, I got the 11 grand, that almost paid for my kitchen remodel. And then a half year later, it dropped to 4 and I refinanced. So I was really lucky, but you can't time that, right? You just don't know up front. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here. Hey, this was really, really great. I'm so glad we did it. And we should probably do this again at some point, just to catch up and see what the market does. really quickly, sometimes I ask my guests here, do you have any horror stories, anything that you ever happened to in lending that is just outrageous? If not, it's not a big deal. I always ask people.
That's a great question. Yes, I do have a horror story. So
Okay.
I have many clients like this. So it's actually not one, it's many, but I've had clients that as much as I've tried. So this one's specific. They wanted to buy, I'm licensed in many different states. So this one was in Miami. So in Florida, the state of Florida. And they were interested in buying a home. And I pre-approved them and I said, hey, you know, we're still missing some of these documents because I like to balance everything out. I'm not someone that's going to write you a letter and I'm going to tell them, hey, you're good to go. I like to pre-screen everything, look at everything, make sure it's all good. So they weren't willing to work with me on that. They said, no, in time, I'm going to give it to you. And I told them, you're not ready. You're not ready to get this home. In the end, they probably wasted about 2 years of my time because I was always willing to be there and help them and answer their questions. I was having hour-long phone conversations with them every single week for 2 years until they finally got into escrow and the time came. And when they had to show the proof of funds, they didn't have enough. So my advice to anyone in our industry is don't get sold on the belief that just because someone says they want to work with you, that's it. Don't count your eggs, you know, before you got them. And always do what's best for the client. Because clearly I wasn't able to, they weren't willing to work with me in that sense, but I tried my best. So always make sure you do the full 150% of your job beforehand so you don't have problems later. And do what I did and made an average of $0 an hour for 2 years with that client.
Oh my God, it sounds like a nightmare.
It was a nightmare. So always listen to the professionals. I don't go to the dentist office and tell them how to do my teeth. I wouldn't go to the real estate agent or the mortgage professional and tell them what I need and what I don't need.
Exactly. Hey, thank you so much, Ron, for coming on.
Thank you.
It was awesome. And I wish you all the best. And hopefully we'll do deals together in the future. I look forward to it. And I'll see you next time, okay?
I'll see you. I look forward to it. Good luck with the Malibu property. It's awesome. Great weather. I'd go there and check it out if I was anybody.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.